Hi, everyone. This is Jana from Enjoy the Life You're Living. And today I'm really thrilled to have our guest, Jessy Abed, with us. Jessy, welcome. We're going to have an
Thank you.
awesome conversation. I just know it, all about holistic medicine. I'd love to hear more about what you're doing now and where you're going. But I think what's always really exciting is hearing about what got people to the place where they're at. And I know you have a really interesting personal journey to where you are right now. And I would love for you to share that with everyone who's listening.
Awesome. Well, thank you for asking. Thank you for having me on here. I'm very excited to be here. So, my story is quite an interesting story. I know with many, they would usually share they got to where they are because they had some sort of incident or experience that brought them there. For me, I've always had an interest in holistic practices. I grew up in the Caribbean where we didn't have access to um, technology, family doctors. So I was taught from a very young age, prevention is the cure. I was taught to live holistically. So that was always my practice. When I moved to Canada, I lived that lifestyle. And it was my dream to work in oncology. I became a medical radiation therapist in advanced practice one. And I just desired to be, I don't know if maybe it was ego driven or the self-care practitioner in me or like the caregiver, I don't know. But
Mm.
I wanted to help with cancer. And when I got into that field, I recognized that it was so separated from the holistic world, but I
Mm.
wanted to bring them both together. I had developed both sides of the coin. I developed a lot of education in holistic, but I also developed a lot of education in conventional. And somewhere along the way, where I was struggling to bring both together and figuring it out, which do I stay in? I had ultimately made the decision I'm going to lean more into the holistic. I'm probably going to give up medicine, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
I suffered a clinically diagnosed burnout. I ended
Mm.
up in hospital where I almost died, and that was because I was operating at an insane level that my body just could not handle. When I was in the emergency room, my eyes were closed. I was trying to force myself to open my eyes and I couldn't. And I was trying to force myself to speak, but I couldn't. I was drifting in and out of consciousness where I could hear, and I was trying to communicate that my heart was racing. Like my heart was going at a fast
Mm.
pace that I couldn't stop it. I didn't know if I was having a heart attack. I didn't know what was happening. And I just remember in my mind just telling myself, slow down, slow down, slow down.
Mm.
What ended up happening in the months that followed was that I started suffering from a lot of panic and anxiety attacks. They just came on. And so I would say within the first month or two coming out of the hospital, I had to learn to like really slow my breath down. I'm also a contrast therapy coach. So I teach in a sauna and a cold plunge. I teach a class whereby breath work is a huge part of it. And that's when I started incorporating that into my life. So at nighttime, when I started having these panics, I would start teaching myself how to breathe through it. And that's what sort of got me down the rabbit hole of being obsessed with breath work because I saw what a difference it made for me. I learned different techniques that I could use for myself depending on the scenario, whether I was walking, whether I was sleeping, whether it was an anxiety attack versus a panic attack, whether I was starting to feel stress. And by implementing and learning and figuring out all of that, I learned what worked and what didn't work for me. And then with working with clients, I also learned what worked and what didn't work for them. And then, as I said before, when you add that whole layer now of longevity, learning to slow your breath down, taking less breaths per minute, like that became really imperative um, for me as well in my teachings, as well as in my personal life.
We hear people say that, and I've heard this often, I just don't have time for it. So it's like,
Mhm.
one of the things is that I would say in that moment is just try it for 5 minutes. Like sometimes I think people have an idea in their head that they have to get really complicated about it or do it for 30 minutes a day. And it just is like the thought of even stepping into it is overwhelming. So
Yeah.
I'd be really interested in hearing how you like ease people into the uptake.
Oh yeah, I'm going to tell you one that I have clients do who are very resistant to that because they're like, Jessy, I don't have time for this. My mind is wandering. I'm like, I get it. My mind wanders too. Next time you're in the shower, because the water is nice and relaxing. I want you to just take 1 minute. Do me a favor. When you're in the shower, just close your eyes. Take one hand, put it on your stomach, the other hand on your chest, and just practice inhaling and exhaling. And if you can, you want to challenge yourself a little bit more, just double that inhale and just take notice to how you're feeling. You'll notice that you start to feel a lot calmer. You may not have time to do this every day. Just take a couple minutes in the morning when you're rushing. You're going to shower anyways, right? You can take 30 seconds in the shower, a minute in the
Mhm.
shower. Just do that. Or even right before bed. When you're climbing into bed and you're stressed out, do the physiological sigh. Do that a couple of times. And
Mhm.
that will actually make you get to bed a little bit quicker than if you're tossing and turning and huffing and puffing. So I do all these little strategies that, as I said before, it seems like people are looking for these grandiose ways of incorporating it. It doesn't have to be. It could be something so small and so simple. So like
Yeah.
the shower, that lands well with a number of my clients. And that's something that I incorporated for myself when I realized, because I still went back to work at the hospital for 2, 3 months after this happened. I'm like, I have to be at the door at 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning. I can't not, like, I don't have the time for 5 minutes. I don't. So it's
Yeah.
working with where you're at and slowly making the changes because when you start seeing the benefits, you actually start wanting to do it more and more. It's the same thing too with those who come into the cold plunge. They start seeing it, so they want to do it more and more. And that's where I start seeing the power of breath work with people. That's when it clicks for a lot of people because they realize in that moment when you slow your breath down, that also stills your mind. And that's one of the few powerful ways where you really can get in touch with your body and your mind. And that's when they almost do a dance and then they come together and it's so
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That is a fantastic recommendation. And it's interesting how when you do hit that realization, there's for me, it wasn't one point, but it was just like, I really want to go do it. Like it almost
Mhm.
became like I'm just really looking forward to doing it versus, oh, I have to do this as something in my life.
Mhm.
So it's become such a pleasurable
Yeah, of
part of
course.
my life. And so it sounds like that's a fantastic way for people to get to that point.
Yeah. It's pleasurable, but as well too, it could also be like a reset.
Yeah.
So I tell some of my clients who are like board members or high performers that are in the corporate setting, before you're going into a meeting that you're really nervous about, just stop outside the door.
Yeah.
A couple of those physiological sighs. Put your hands on your chest and your stomach. I know it sounds and seems silly, but that physical contact really can get your blood pressure and your heart
Mm.
rate
Mm.
and when they start doing that, so more often than not, they do it as a coping. But then
Mm.
when they see the benefits, they're like, "Oh, I love this. I want to keep this for like health."
Mm.
So
Mm.
it's like the case of me, you turn to something because I did not want to have a heart attack. I did not want to be in the hospital again. I was scared crapless that something was happening to me. So I learned these methods to cope. But
Mm.
now these methods have become a way of me being healthy that I enjoy it as part of my self-care and my daily routine.
Yeah.
So, as I said, sometimes it's pitched as a coping and then it ends up becoming a practice. So that ultimately ended up ironically, even though I made the decision to go into the holistic space, that was the nail in the coffin and the lesson that I learned that it was so important to be aligned with what truly serves you. So, in essence, it was the universe forcing me to do what I really wanted to do ultimately.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting sometimes that it takes that little push to get us to the place where we're supposed to go. When that happened, was it something that like did it take you off guard that this had happened, or what like were there these little things where you're like, okay, I have to like get control of this?
To be honest, no. I've always been a high functioning performer. Even when I did my master's degree, I did my master's while still working full time at the hospital while running clinical trials. And everyone kept telling me, you can't do this all. I've heard that my whole life. I could do it all. I could work jobs, I can train clients, I can health coach. So I was used to operating where, I start my day at 4 or 5 a.m. and I just power through. I still had time to cook. I still had time to work. I just didn't know how to slow down. That was the norm for
Hmm.
me. I did
Hmm.
that for 17 years. That was normal.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I didn't understand what that was doing to my nervous system. So,
Hmm.
quite frankly, if I was not scared to death, literally, I probably would still keep operating at that level. It wasn't
Hmm.
until because I don't know if I want to say fortunately or unfortunately, I wasn't aware as to how bad it was because I full on collapsed. I went unconscious. I was having seizures. This was around, I went home to visit my family. This was in the presence of all of my family members. So I
Hmm.
think if it wasn't from me hearing how scared they were, they thought they were going to lose me.
Hmm.
And from me being in a situation where I could hear them talking, but I couldn't open my eyes. I was in the emergency room, I was in the ER. I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't speak. I could kind of hear, and then I drifted away. And every time that kept happening, I didn't know if that was the last time. I actually thought I was dying.
Hmm.
So the fear is what caused me to make that decision. The fear
Hmm.
that this could happen, because the doctors told me after, you cannot continue at this rate. This is pure stress. Like if you continue at this rate, you will have a heart attack. You will not make it. So,
Hmm.
admittedly, if that didn't happen, I don't know if I would have recognized the signs because if you asked me, I was like, oh, I'm sleeping well. My ordering is telling me I'm sleeping well. I'm getting 8 hours of sleep. I'm eating well. Like I'm exercising. My nervous system was not slowing down. I mean, my heart rate was off the charts. My breathing
Hmm.
was off the charts, but so it took me having to learn that to now recognize the signs so that now I can teach other people because when you're in this warp, you sometimes you don't you can't do it, but you don't know how to get out. You're like, oh, I could just push through. This is just norm. When it becomes a norm, you don't know how to get out of it, right? So you talk
Yeah.
yourself into, oh, I'll just push through. I'll just push through. I'll just relax. I'll get a good night's sleep tonight. I'll be fine tomorrow. Da da da. And then it becomes like a rat race.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. So I want to ask you a bit more about like that whole high achieving stuff and some of the work that you're doing now. But first, I wanted to ask you about being a lifestyle medicine coach. So in your bio, that's what one of the things that I read, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And I'd love if you could explain for people who are listening, what is that? Like, what does a lifestyle medicine coach do?
Great question. That essentially is, as the name suggests, it's lifestyle medicine. Food is medicine, sleep is medicine. It's incorporating all
Mhm.
of these things that we know to be an instrumental part of our life, but in a way, it's science-backed as well, too. It's giving information that has years of data that supports it. To be honest with you, it's the same thing as a health coach, but I guess it's a bit more of a credibility and a bit more depth to it. It's not saying the simple things like eat your fruits and vegetables. It's going more into the depth of understanding people. I also am an integrative health practitioner, so I look at your biomarkers, functional labs, doing things that's telling a bit more of the story about what's going on with you as the individual. Thing with health is that it's so personal. What's happening with
Mm,
us as an individual cannot be compared. Yes, you can, I guess, in theory, make comparisons, but we have to look at the individual, but we have to also look at the whole of the individual, their lifestyle, their wiring, the environment that they're in, what's going on inside as well as outside of their body. So, lifestyle medicine really allows us to take all of these elements together with proper training so that we can help make inferences and recommendations based on that.
mhm. Okay. So, and the other thing that was in your bio was about helping high achievers, and so it kind of brings me back to the story that we heard about your how you ended up making this final decision that you're going to go full force into this lifestyle medicine realm. What is it about high achievers that gets them into a place where it's like almost being detached from their health, like they're breathing, they're sleeping, they're eating. What is it that gets them there? And then how do they like manage to stay above that for a period of time?
Mhm. A really great question, and one that I've had to ask myself because I'm like, why am I different? What makes me behave in this manner when I don't really need to?
Yeah.
I chalk it up to being it's my wiring, but it goes back to a lot of different things. Obviously, the way we were brought up, our childhood, certain traumas, like our insecurities, all these things play a role in this. For me specifically, I came to Canada as an immigrant and I had to fight harder than anybody else. Like the
Mm,
average person. I was 16
mm,
years old. I had no family here. So
mm,
I had to constantly prove myself. Even to get my papers to come here was
mm,
2, 3 years of work. So the average 12-year-old, 13-year-old is probably out there enjoying time on the beach with their
mm,
other peers and all that. This was not put on me by my parents, by the way. This was me as a result of watching all the people that I love pass away with cancer. I felt helpless. And I
mm,
think with me being a nurturer, I knew that this was something that I wanted to do. And the possibility of doing it, I'm from Barbados, doing it from a small little island is not possible. I knew I had to get out of there. I knew I
mm,
had to prove that in order for me to do that, I had to be exceptional because it wasn't just about getting a bank loan and having a mortgage signed against and having everyone chip in and scholarships. You had to prove that you had something to offer for immigration to even give you a student visa.
mm,
So I've done a lot of, therapy and reflective to understand why I became this way, but that
mm,
was a huge part of it. And then once I got here in university, it's you had to prove that you were better than the average person so that you can get into University of Toronto Medical Radiation Sciences. They only took 60 students a year
yeah.
and one immigrant. They took one international student. So I think for me, I just became constantly that higher achieving and maybe it's a bit of an insecurity, that validation. I need to get more degrees. I need to get more awards. Like people are going to think that they can only listen to me if I become qualified. I only
Mm,
have something to say if I have this. So it just became like almost like an obsession where
mm,
I felt that, and especially I think in large part because I was around cancer patients every day, 40, 50 patients a day watching them. And I thought, okay, like you have this association with death where I'm not scared of death, but I'm scared of how I'm living. I have to make sure that I'm
mm,
not wasting time. I can't sit and watch TV. I
mm,
don't even own a TV. I
mm,
can't sit and watch TV. I have to be doing all of these productive things. When I see my friends, I have to make memories. I have to go and do these experiences. And it became an obsession, bucket list for travels, time with friends, going to the newest restaurant or doing an experience. And it just, you get into there, but you don't realize until you're forced to sit with it. Why are you being this way? What is it getting you? What are the accolades getting you? What are all
yeah.
these experiences and these bucket lists really getting you? Is that really what, when you look back at life, is that really what life is about?
Yeah.
So this crazy experience really forced me to become very introspective and look at it. And it's partly why I've pivoted into, like I was helping high performers before, but it's partly why I've gone into this because I don't want people to feel like you've got to quit your job. You don't have to do that. You just don't have to get to the point where you feel almost resentful of your life and you feel like this is it, like everything was pointless. It's not. You just have to, figure a balance out, figure out what works, and maybe get to the root cause of why you're doing what you're doing. If it's something that really is worth it to you, let's figure a way out where you can get there. For me, I realized chasing all these things, it wasn't worth it for me anymore. Like I didn't need
Yeah.
to be doing this.
And so the people who come to you, do you feel like they are at that point where they realize this isn't worth it, but they don't know what to do? Or are some of them at the point where they haven't quite gotten that far? Like they're just starting to get these twinges of like, oh, I'm kind of unhappy actually.
Yeah, most of the clients that I have and most of the people that I talk to, they're not at that level, which is, I think, great because that's when I feel like I can really help before it gets to be really defeating. Because for
Yeah.
me, I felt very defeated after a while. I was just like, if it wasn't for the look on my family's face, like my cousin was just like, your brother was so, he thought that that was it for you. He thought that you were gone.
Mm,
And I just don't want to do that. It was my little 3-year-old nephew was the one who found me. Like he was the one who told
Mm,
his mom, you know?
mm,
So I just don't, that fear is what pushed me to make those decisions. I would like to be able to help people before it gets to that point, before it involves other people and it becomes a bit more traumatic or a bit more intense, for lack of a better word. So, as luck would have it, I just happen to be attracting people before it gets there. Not
yeah.
saying that it's there's not others who get out there, but it just is what I'm attracting at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. So you've got this high achiever in front of you, and you understand more about their story. And then, what are some of the things you touched on them, like sleep and breathing and eating, and um, can you talk to us a bit more about those things and how they're integrated into that whole person? And the other part is what's the uptake, especially from high achievers? Are they like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna like get on it and do all this, or is there some resistance where it's like, I'm so busy, I don't have time, I can't find more hours to sleep. So kind of like, what are those things? And then how are people, what's the uptake when you present
Mhm.
them with, here's all these great science-backed strategies that can help you?
So the main thing is I meet people where they're at. I have to give them
Mm,
strategies that work for them,
mm,
not for everybody, for them. So if I was to put myself in a position where I was a year ago, where I was waking up at 4 or 5 a.m., the reality was I didn't work for myself. I worked for somebody else. It meant waking up at 4 or 5 a.m., heading into the hospital. I didn't have access to my phone. I had scheduled lunch breaks. Sometimes I didn't get them
mm,
working with that, telling someone who's in that environment, make sure that you have your slow mornings where you have, time to have your lemon water. It's like, no, I barely have time to have a shower. I want to maximize my sleep, like, and I'm on call half the time. So
yeah.
it's really working with the individual, but it's not always these grand gestures that you
Mm,
have to do, these big things. In fact, more often than not, it's the small little things that you can start because that's also going to be what they're going to stick with.
mm,
So for me, I was that old school health coach scientist where I ate really well. I slept pretty good for the most part. Some nights I got 6 hours. I mean, back in the day when I was in university, I used to say, I'll sleep when I'm dead. I could do 3 hours like no one's business. I worked three
yeah.
jobs to get through university. It was fine. I was also a lot younger. I could pull that off. But where I was at, I was getting the sleep. I was eating well. I had it scheduled though. If you looked at my calendar, I was booked from like 5, 6 a.m. right up until 9 p.m. So even
Mm,
though I was doing all of the eating, the exercising, the sleeping, the nervous system was the part that I neglected. And
mm,
that for me became the crux of what I incorporated into my practice because having a schedule where you look down and you have 40 things booked in for the day, you're obsessed with to-do lists, you're going through the motions where you're running from one appointment to the next, you're seeing friends, okay, I can fit you in for an hour and a half. Let's sit, let's catch up. And then the whole time my mind is drifting because I can't disconnect. Or I'm like, okay, I'm going to
mm,
schedule 20 minutes to meditate. Sit there, okay, what's my to-do list? Da, da, da. It's just when
yeah.
you are too, your rain barrel is too full, you can't do all those other things. So that for me, because I recognize that I could tell someone eat really well, sleep really well, but if you were running like an energizer bunny and you're not slowing down, then you defeat the whole purpose of, incorporating something like breath work. You couldn't tell me 2 years to do breath work. I'd be like, Jana, I don't have time for breath work. Like, what are you talking
Right.
about? My brain is going a mile a minute. So it took a lot of that to realize that that approach was different. So I took on a different approach. So with my clients, again, I meet them where they're at, but I introduce small little changes, of course, more for the physical, but also the emotional and the mental. And that's the part of it where I try to bring all of it in together. So, okay, you know what? You've got kids in the morning and you can't do your 20-step skincare routine, which is what a lot of people throw out there. That's not important. Can you take 5 minutes to yourself? Can you take a 5 minute break at lunch? Like finding something that's realistic to your lifestyle that you
Mm,
could allow yourself to truly disconnect or to
mm,
truly slow down.
mhm.
So
So when you were at that point where your nervous system was dysregulated, how did you overcome that inertia that you just mentioned, where you said, like, I just don't have time to do breath work? Like, how did you start to say, or step back and say, I need to do this, or I want to do this?
it was not a want, it was a need. It's
A
because my
need.
doctor told me
Mm,
when I was in the emergency room, I vaguely remember his face the next morning, vaguely. And what was said to me, if you don't slow this down, you will have a heart attack and you may not make it. When I
mm,
looked at my Aura ring and I was tracking, my HRVs were consistently in the 20s. My heart rate was always high. My blood pressure was always high. This is coming from a high performance health coach, by the way. So it was something that, again, the scientist in me never really gravitated to the breath work, the mindset. Like for me, the mindset was you can do it, you can do it, not no, no, no. You need to stop and slow
mm,
down. So that's partly why it influenced how I coach right now, is because I didn't see a need of it being a necessity. I knew it was important. Of course, I studied it,
mm,
but it wasn't until I was faced with it and realizing that if you don't slow down, your body's going to force you to, which is exactly what happened. My body gave out. And it was that fair that, because this was the second time this happened to me. It happened to me a year before that, but that time I wasn't drifting in and out, and that time I did actually go into cardiac um, arrest. So, you
mm,
know, with my age, with everything that I stand for, it's actually embarrassing and ridiculous that someone in my situation is in that situation.
mm,
So that fear of partly making my family go through that again, because it happened both times when I went home to visit them.
mhm,
And I think it was because my body just went from being at high level to now like finally slowing down.
mm,
But it was also because of my desire to figure out what's happening in my body. What is
mhm,
happening that my heart rate is so off the wall? People keep telling me you talk so fast, you breathe so quickly. What's happening? So it was that true desire to figure out something is off with me here and I need to work on it. And when I started getting into breath work and getting an understanding as to what was going on in my body, that is why I made the change.
mm,
Out of fear for my family, out of fear for my friends. They were handling me like kid gloves. And because I thought, I don't want to leave this earth so soon. Like that
mhm,
fear that it was so close that I could have maybe not woken up that next day. Like that's how close it came. I knew I had to make
mm.
that change. So I don't want other people to be in the situation where they get a reality check. That was my reality check.
Yeah,
But it's also why I do what I do is because I've been on that side where I didn't really see it was important, even though I knew it was important. Now
yeah.
it's me helping others see why this is important. So even if they don't understand from a health perspective, I now spin it, well, from a longevity perspective, you need to slow your breath down. If you slow your breath down, you can live a little longer, like that angle.
Yeah, for sure. So, so you came to this realization that it was important. How did you, what were some of the first steps that you took into it? Or even what are some of the ways that you help coach people into taking that seriously and fitting it into their everyday?
Well, firstly, I had to become qualified myself and practice it on
Mm,
myself. So I was doing it for myself, and then I wanted to become certified myself. And once I did all of the education, focusing on nervous system, trying to get regulated again in breath work, I started looking at the roadmap that I had as a coach, what I give
mm,
my clients, and then I made myself that client avatar, realizing,
mm,
okay, so what can I give clients, these high performers, these working moms that don't have these, like a lot of time in the day for this? And in all honesty, I pivoted quite a little bit, just depending on, like I'd say my first 10, 20 clients helped me shape how I went about
mm,
that. But again,
mm.
it's also so personal. So I can't tell you one strategy because it does
Yeah,
depend on who it is, right? I
yeah.
pivot as necessary. Some people aren't open to it at all. They're like, Jess, I
Yeah.
don't want to do this. I don't want to do the breath work. So
Yeah.
I do other things that can help them without them even realizing it. I'm from the Caribbean, so the clients that I have down there go for a walk on the beach. Even here in the
Mm.
summer, go outside, ground for a little bit. Go and have your glass of lemon water and sit on the patio for 5, 10 minutes. Go sit
Yeah.
in your car, roll the window down, and just have your tea, have your hot water. Like different things that I
Yeah.
inadvertently do without them realizing that I'm doing the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fantastic. So what's next? You have some fun stuff coming up, and what are some of the things that's on the roadmap?
See, that's a beautiful question because while I do have opportunities and there are things coming up, part of what set me in motion with this is that need to always keep chasing accolades and achievements and accomplishments in
Mm,
this. So I'm really leaning into the slowing down.
mm,
I did share with you that there's a possibility I might be moving to Dubai, which is where some of my family members are and where the longevity space is kicking off. But I've held off on that for so long in part because I needed to just slow down. I needed
yeah.
to focus on not living this big, grandiose life, just taking it one step at a time and maybe not having a plan for tomorrow. I don't know. So
Yeah.
that is semi on the horizon. Of course, I still want to make a change in the world. I really want to help go from treating cancer patients to now helping to prevent. That's still my ultimate passion and purpose.
Yeah.
But I'm still trying to, as well, also honor that you don't need to have these big plans.
Yeah.
Just kind of, I'm going a little bit more with the flow. So I may
Yeah.
go there. It's looking like I'm going there, but it's also, if it doesn't feel right, then I just keep doing what I'm doing, which is speaking, helping
Yeah.
individuals, doing the best that I can to make a difference in this world. And I know that sounds so cliche, but that's, you
But
know,
you are. And, just bringing up your experience with working in the health system with cancer patients, I'd love to touch on this just a little bit, if you don't mind,
of course.
about this whole thing of conventional medicine meeting holistic health. And for many, many years, there's been like, they're completely apart, and the research around them has been, I would say, imbalanced, where there's like just a bunch of research on the conventional side, not much on the holistic side. But that's changing, where now we're seeing a whole lot more really fantastic research come out about holistic medicine. So what are your thoughts on how will these two, will they ever come together? Um, is it possible to get conventional medicine to accept some of these other things? What are your predictions about this for the future?
I mean, I'm going to say I'm like forever an optimist. Of course, there is. It's actually what I tried to do. In 2015, I did my master's in radiation sciences, medical radiation sciences, and the focus was on exercise for cancer patients and nutrition. And I was very blessed in that one of the lead oncologists there was very into the holistic space. So she approved of me doing a lot of my courses. I actually did my master's with nutritional science program. So I was able to integrate a lot of these holistic practices into conventional medicine. And the idea was
Mm,
to roll that out at the hospital and have, the patients have access to this. Ultimately, it didn't work, but I knew the interest was there because the patients were interested in it. They kept
mm,
asking me for it. And over the years, I would coach them based on that. So even though we're supposed to guide them with certain things, I'm throwing in the holistic, and I knew that the feedback was coming there. I think we live in a wonderful world right now in 2025 with, AI technology. The States is a little bit different than Canada, but I think also to the shift that's happening in the States, people are really understanding that they want to own their health.
mm,
They don't want to be running when they're sick. They want to take control. And
mm.
if you had a choice, am I going to spend money on being healthy or am I going to spend money on being sick? Canadians, for the large part, we got free healthcare. I'll worry about it later. But I
Right.
think that's changing,
Mm,
especially post-COVID. People are realizing, oh my God, I got to wait 9, 10 months to have this special consult. So I see the shift happening. And I think it's just a matter of time when you have a lot of these organizations and adversaries coming out in biohacking and in longevity that's pushing all this stuff. I think
Mhm.
the conventional world is eventually going to catch up. I think they have no choice but to,
Yeah.
because the beauty about it is an area like biohacking, which is why I got into it. I don't follow the trends or the mainstream or the extremes. It's obviously very personal, but what I love about it is that it's the personal aspect that's science backed. You're using your
Mm.
own data, you're using your biomarkers, you're using what's conventional, like what's for you, and there's research. So I'm thinking, I'm hoping that as things evolve and more research starts to pick up in these areas, the conventional world and the holistic world will blend.
Yeah. Nice. I hope so too.
I think so. I think it's coming. It will be a lag, but I think it's coming. And I think biohacking is showing that it's getting there.
Yeah, for sure. And there's something about when people take control of their own health. It's amazing to see. And we as consumers of health, we have so much more knowledge around our context and what's going on than a medical professional does. And I think with the busyness of conventional medicine, it's hard for them. How can you know all these things that are happening in someone's life that might actually be affecting where they're at? And so I think that there's this, like you said, a beautiful opportunity right now to be bringing these two worlds together,
Hmm.
so that the context that the person is living in and all the other things in life that affect who we are and how our bodies react to who we are, can be brought over into conventional medicine.
Yeah, of course. I mean, let's be honest, conventional medicine is analog. It's not possible for a doctor to sit down with their 10, 15-minute appointment and to be able to look through your 40, 50, 60, 70-year history or your multiple appointments. It can't. AI and technology might allow that, but they also can't see the big picture because there's too much data to sift through. The human brain can't sift through that much information. So I
Yeah,
think, um, I mean, AI is controversial. It could be good and bad, but I think that if we choose to look at it from a good, I think AI will actually help conventional medicine connect with the holistic world. That's my
yeah,
hope, anyways.
yeah. Me too, Jesse. So, in closing, one of the questions that I ask all my guests is, what does the phrase "enjoy the life you're living" mean to you?
Honestly,
Uh,
small joys, living in the now.
uh,
So, as I have explained, and it's been clear how I've been living my life prior to the last 6 months, was always chasing experiences, memories, accolades, accomplishments, and all that. When I left the hospital, my biggest thing, everyone kept asking me is what's next? I'm like, I just want to slow down. I want to slow down. And I started having this term that I would call my small joys. My
mm,
small joys is being able to wake up in the morning and have my hot water with lemon and be able to actually finish it, knowing I don't have to run out the door. So I
yeah,
started living my life for the small joys.
yeah.
So that for me is ultimately what living is about. It's the small little things.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you, Jesse.
Thank
Really
you,
appreciate
Jana.
having this conversation with you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.